Captain Jake Morrison pressed his face against the cold metal window of the bridge. Outside, space looked empty and dark. Small pieces of rust floated past the glass like snow. His ship, the UES Liberty, shook hard as it jumped through space. The old engines made loud noises that hurt his ears. Jake had been born on this ship 32 years ago. His father had been born here too. So had his grandfather. None of them had ever seen Earth. Earth was gone. Dead. Burned to nothing 300 years ago. The Liberty was huge, so big that people lived their whole lives inside it and never saw all the rooms. It had farms and schools and factories. It had streets and parks made of metal. But it was old. Very old. Parts of it broke every day. The walls had holes that workers fixed with whatever metal they could find. Jake walked to the main screen where Commander Pete Walsh stood watching numbers move up and down. Pete was older than Jake, maybe 50, with gray hair and tired eyes. He had been listening to radio signals from far away. "Anything new?" Jake asked. Pete shook his head. "Same old stuff. Trade signals from the big planets. News about wars we don't care about. The galaxy still thinks we're dead." Jake nodded. It was better that way. If the galaxy knew humans were still alive, they would come to finish what they started. 300 years ago, the other races had decided humans were too dangerous, too wild, too hard to control. So they had attacked every human world at the same time. Billions died. Only 12 ships got away. Those 12 ships still flew together, through the dark. They were called generation ships because whole generations of people lived and died on them. The biggest was the UES Defiance, where Admiral Lisa Hart lived. She was in charge of all 12 ships and all the people on them. Jake's radio made a noise. "Captain Morrison, please come to the communications room." Jake walked down a long hall with pipes and wires on the walls. The ship smelled like oil and old metal. People walked past him going to work. Children ran to school. Everyone knew everyone on the Liberty. They had to. There were only 12,000 people on his ship. The communications room was small and full of machines that beeped and flashed. Lieutenant Emma Brooks sat at a desk covered with screens. She was young, maybe 25, with short brown hair. She looked worried. "Captain, I'm picking up something strange," she said. "It's a distress call, but not from any human ship." Jake sat down next to her. "Play it." The speakers crackled with static. Then a voice came through. It didn't sound human. It was higher and faster, like a bird trying to talk. "This is Admiral Kex Thaler of the Zephyrian Commonwealth Fleet. We are under attack by unknown forces. Our shields are failing. We need help. Anyone who receives this message, please respond. We are dying out here." Emma looked at Jake. "The signal is coming from the Kepler system. That's only 2 days away if we push the engines." Jake stared at the radio. The Zephyrians were one of the big powers in the galaxy. They had good ships and strong weapons. If they were asking for help, something very bad was happening. "Have you told Admiral Hart?" Jake asked. "Not yet. I wanted to make sure it was real first. The signal is strong and getting stronger. Whatever is attacking them is winning." Jake stood up and walked to the window. He could see the other ships in the fleet. The UES Freedom was closest, its hull covered with patches of different colored metal. The UES Victory flew behind them, black smoke coming from one of its engines. All the ships looked like they might fall apart at any moment, but they were still flying, still alive, still human. "Send the signal to all ships," Jake said. "Admiral Hart needs to hear this." Emma's fingers moved over the controls. "Sending now, Captain." Within an hour, Jake got a call to come to the Defiance for a meeting. He took a small shuttle between the ships. Up close, the Defiance looked even older than the Liberty. Its hull was gray and brown with rust. Big guns stuck out from its sides, but Jake knew they were old and slow compared to modern weapons. The meeting room on the Defiance was full of captains from all 12 ships. Admiral Lisa Hart stood at the front. She was a tall woman with white hair and hard eyes. She had been fighting to keep the fleet alive for 20 years. "You all heard the distress call?" she said. "The Zephyrians are under attack. They're asking for help." Captain Roy Mitchell from the UES Constitution raised his hand. Admiral, with respect, this isn't our fight. We've stayed hidden for 300 years. Why risk everything now? Because we're human, said Captain Danny Walsh from the UES Courage. We don't leave people to die when we can help. Our ships are old, said Captain Susan Carter from the UES Valor. Our weapons are weak. What can we do against something that's beating the Zephyrians? Admiral Hart looked around the room. Dr. Carl Jensen, tell them about our ships. Dr. Jensen was the chief engineer. He was short and fat with dirty hands from working on machines all day. He stood up slowly. Our ships are old, yes, but they're tough. We've been fixing them with spare parts and hope for 3 centuries, and they're still flying. Modern ships break when you look at them wrong. Our ships have been shot, crashed, and burned, and they keep going. That doesn't make us strong enough to fight, Captain Mitchell said. Admiral Hart smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. No, but it makes us human, and humans don't quit, ever. She walked to a big screen that showed a map of nearby space. The Kepler system flashed red. The galaxy forgot about us. They think we're dead. Maybe it's time to remind them we're still here. Jake felt something stir in his chest, fear maybe, or excitement. The fleet had been running for so long he had almost forgotten they could fight. What are your orders, Admiral? He asked. Admiral Hart looked at each captain in the room. We go to Kepler, we help the Zephyrians, and we show the galaxy that humans are back. The meeting ended quickly after that. Jake flew back to the Liberty feeling like something important was about to happen. The fleet began to turn toward the Kepler system, 12 old ships moving through the dark. Behind them, they left 300 years of hiding. Ahead of them waited a battle that would wake up the galaxy. The Kepler system burned with death and fire. Admiral Kexthaler watched from his command ship as another Zephyrian cruiser exploded in a ball of white light. The enemy ships moved like black shadows through space, their hulls so dark they seemed to swallow light itself. The Void Collective had come from nowhere. No one knew where they came from or what they wanted. They just appeared in systems and began destroying everything. Their ships were fast and deadly. Their weapons cut through Zephyrian shields like they were made of paper. Admiral, we've lost the Bright Wing and the Star Dancer, reported his communications officer. The enemy is moving toward our position. Kexthaler's scales turned pale, blue with fear. In 30 years of service, he had never seen anything like this. The Void Collective ships didn't fight like normal warships. They moved in perfect formation, never making mistakes, never showing weakness. It was like fighting, machines that felt nothing. Send another distress call, he ordered. Tell anyone listening that the Zephyrian Commonwealth is falling. If someone doesn't help us soon, we're all dead. That's when the sensors picked up something new. 12 massive contacts dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. The sensor officer looked confused as he read the data. Admiral, I'm reading 12 very large ships, but the technology readings are strange. Strange how? They're using fusion drives, sir, and basic metal armor. The weapons are, I think they're projectile weapons, sir. Bullets and missiles, not energy beams. Kexthaler stared at the screen. Fusion drives were ancient technology. No one had used projectile weapons in 200 years. What kind of backward race would still use such old equipment? A voice came over the radio. It was deep and calm, speaking in perfect galactic standard. Zephyrian vessels, this is Captain Jake Morrison of the Terran Expeditionary Fleet. We received your distress call. Permission to engage the hostiles? Terran? Kexthaler had never heard of such a race. Unknown vessels, this is Admiral Kexthaler. We accept any help you can give, but be warned. These enemies are very dangerous. Understood, Admiral. We're moving to attack position now. The 12 human ships moved forward. They were huge, each one the size of a small moon. But they moved slowly, like tired old animals. Black smoke came from their engines. Parts of their hulls were different colors where repairs had been made. They looked like they might fall apart at any moment. The Void Collective noticed them too. 3 of their ships broke away from attacking the Zephyrians and moved toward the humans. Their weapons began to charge, ready to destroy these primitive newcomers. On the UES Liberty, Captain Jake Morrison stood on his bridge watching the enemy approach. The Void Collective ships were beautiful in a deadly way. Smooth black hulls that reflected no light. Weapons that glowed with purple energy. They moved without making any sound. "They're pretty," said Commander Pete Walsh. "Too bad we have to break them." "All ships, this is Morrison," Jake said into his radio. "Remember the plan. We're not here to fight fair. We're here to win." Lieutenant Emma Brooks watched her screens as the human fleet spread out. Each ship was doing something different. The Wayne UES Freedom was launching small craft from its hangar bays. The UES Victory was dumping something from its cargo holds. The UES Defiance was moving toward the biggest group of enemy ships. "What are those small craft?" asked the Zephyrian sensor officer. Admiral Kex Thalar looked at the display. Hundreds of tiny ships were pouring out of the human vessels, but they didn't look like fighters. They looked like work vehicles. "Are those mining ships?" he asked. On the UES Valor, Commander Susan Carter was coordinating the attack. The small craft weren't fighters at all. They were mining pods, construction mechs, maintenance shuttles, and cargo haulers. Every ship that could fly had been turned into a weapon. "Remember, people," she said over the radio. "These fancy aliens expect us to fight like a military, but we're not military, we're survivors, so let's survive. The first Void Collective ship fired at the approaching swarm. Purple beams cut through space, hitting several of the small craft. They exploded in balls of fire, but there were hundreds more, and they kept coming. The enemy weapons were designed to fight proper warships. They could target big ships easily, but the human swarm was chaos. Mining pods flew in crazy patterns. Construction mechs tumbled through space like they were out of control. Maintenance shuttles moved so slowly they seemed harmless. The Void Collective's targeting systems couldn't keep up. They were built to fight organized fleets, not a mob of civilian ships being flown by people who didn't care about military tactics. Lieutenant Frank Davis piloted his modified cargo shuttle toward the nearest enemy ship. His shuttle was old and slow, but it was carrying something special. In the cargo bay were 20 tons of mining explosives, the kind used to crack open asteroids. "This is for Earth," he said, and rammed his shuttle into the enemy ship's hull. The explosion was huge. The Void Collective ship's shields flickered and died. Atmosphere vented from holes in its hull. It was still alive, but it was hurt. All around the battle, more human pilots were doing the same thing. They weren't trying to win dogfights or show off their flying skills. They were trying to break things. And humans were very good at breaking things. The UES Constitution, commanded by Captain Roy Mitchell, tried something different. Instead of launching small ships, it opened its cargo bays and began firing shipping containers at the enemy. The containers weren't empty. They were full of metal scraps, broken machinery, and industrial waste. When they hit the Void Collective ships, they didn't do much damage, but they stuck to the hulls, covering sensors and weapon ports with junk. "Primitive but effective," Admiral Kex Thalar said as he watched. The Void Collective ships were slowing down, their perfect formation breaking up as they tried to clean the garbage off their hulls. Dr. Amy Foster was working frantically in the science lab of the UES Sanctuary. She had been studying the enemy ships since they arrived, looking for weaknesses. What she found surprised her. "Admiral Hart," she called over the radio. "The enemy ships use quantum computers for everything. Navigation, weapons, shields. But quantum computers hate interference. If we can generate the right kind of electromagnetic noise—" "What kind of noise?" Admiral Hart asked from the Defiance. "The kind our ships make just by existing, ma'am. Our old fusion reactors, our metal hulls, our primitive electronics. We're walking interference generators." Admiral Hart smiled. The galaxy had always said humans were too noisy, too chaotic, too unpredictable. Now that chaos was their weapon. "All ships, move in close," she ordered. "Let's show these aliens what human chaos looks like." The 12-generation ships moved forward like ancient gods of war. They were old and ugly and loud. Their weapons were simple and brutal. Their tactics made no sense to any military computer, but they were human. And that made all the difference. The Void Collective was about to learn what the galaxy had forgotten. Humans didn't fight to look good. They fought to win. The Prime Harvester had destroyed 47 different species across the galaxy. Each victory had been simple. Superior technology and perfect tactics always won. The Void Collective never lost because they never made mistakes. But these new ships were different. They made no sense. They flew in patterns that hurt to watch. Their weapons were ancient and crude, but they kept working. Most confusing of all, they seemed to want to get destroyed. The Prime Harvester watched as another small human ship rammed into one of his cruisers. The ship exploded, killing everyone inside. But the explosion took out the cruiser's main weapon. It was a trade that no logical species would make. "These creatures are insane," he said to his tactical computer. "They destroy themselves to hurt us." "Analysis confirms irrational behavior," the computer replied. "Recommend withdrawal to study new enemy tactics." But the Prime Harvester had never retreated. He would not start now. He ordered his fleet to focus fire on the largest human ship. If he could destroy their flagship, the rest would surrender. On the UES Defiance, Admiral Lisa Hart watched the enemy ships turn toward her. 12 Void Collective cruisers were moving in perfect formation, their weapons charging to full power. "Ma'am, they're targeting us," reported her weapons officer. "Good," Admiral Hart said. "That means they're not shooting at anyone else. All ships, continue the attack. Don't worry about us." The bridge crew looked at her with surprise. She was ordering them to ignore their flagship being destroyed. But Hart had been fighting to keep humans alive for 20 years. She knew that sometimes the leader had to die so others could live. The first enemy beams hit the Defiance's hull. The old metal armor melted and burned. Alarms screamed throughout the ship. But the ship kept flying. The hull was thick and strong, built to last for centuries. It would take more than a few shots to kill her. "Return fire," Hart ordered. The Defiance's main guns were ancient railguns that fired chunks of metal at incredible speed. They were loud and slow and used too much power, but when they hit hard. The metal slugs punched through the enemy shields and tore holes in their hulls. Captain Roy Mitchell was watching the battle from the UES Constitution when he made his decision. His ship was already damaged from earlier fighting. One engine was dead and the hull had cracks that leaked air, but the Constitution could still move, and she could still fight. "All hands, this is the captain," he said over the ship's speakers. "We're going to ram the enemy flagship. It's been an honor serving with you all." The Constitution turned toward the largest Void Collective ship. Her remaining engines pushed her forward, faster and faster. The crew had minutes to reach the escape pods, but most of them stayed at their stations. They wanted to make sure the ship hit its target. The Void Collective flagship tried to turn away, but it was too late. The Constitution, all 2 million, tons of her, crashed into the enemy ship's side. Both ships exploded in a ball of fire that lit up the entire system. Captain Mitchell died with his ship, but his sacrifice crippled the enemy fleet. The Void Collective ships began to fall back, their perfect formation breaking apart. That's when the real human attack began. Commander Luke Adams led the boarding parties. His team was made up of construction workers, miners, and engineers. They didn't have military training, but they knew how to work in dangerous places, and they knew how to break things. Steve Parker had been a welder before the war. Now he was cutting through the hull of a Void Collective ship with his plasma torch. The aliens inside were tall and thin, with gray skin and big black eyes. They carried weapons that shot beams of light, but Steve had a welding torch that could cut through anything, and he had Linda Hayes backing him up with a demolition charge. Linda used to blow up mountains for mining companies. Alien ships were much easier. "Got another one," Linda said as her explosive took out a whole section of the enemy ship. "These things are built too light. No wonder they break so easy." The Void Collective soldiers were confused by the human attacks. They had been trained to fight other soldiers, not construction workers with industrial tools. Their energy weapons were designed to kill quickly and cleanly. But the humans just kept coming, even when they were hurt. Tony Rodriguez was the chief mechanic on the UES Resilience. He had turned his ship's cargo launchers into weapons. Instead of launching supply containers, he was firing them at the enemy ships. The containers were full of metal scraps, broken machinery, and anything else he could find. The improvised weapons weren't elegant, but they worked. The containers hit the Void Collective ships and exploded, sending shrapnel in all directions. The alien shields could stop energy beams, but they couldn't stop chunks of metal flying at high speed. Dr. Amy Foster was still studying the enemy ships from her lab on the UES Sanctuary. She had found something important. The Void Collective ships were controlled by quantum computers that needed perfect conditions to work. Any interference made them slow and stupid. "All ships, this is Dr. Foster," she called over the radio. "Use your industrial equipment. Welders, plasma cutters, fusion torches. The electromagnetic noise will mess up their computers." Soon every human ship was firing up every piece of equipment they had. Welding torches burned in space. Plasma cutters carved through enemy hulls. Fusion reactors were pushed to maximum power. The noise was incredible. The Void Collective ships began to move like they were drunk. Their weapons fired at empty space. Their navigation systems sent them into each other. The perfect formation became a chaotic mess. Admiral Kexthaler watched from his command ship as the humans destroyed the enemy fleet. It was the strangest battle he had ever seen. The humans didn't fight like soldiers. They fought like workers who were angry about having their day interrupted. "Sir," his communications officer said, "I'm receiving reports from across the sector. Other races are asking about these humans. They want to know who they are and where they came from." Kexthaler looked at the human fleet. The ships were old and ugly and covered in rust. But they had just done something impossible. They had beaten the Void Collective using nothing but determination and spare parts. "Tell them," he said, "that the humans are back. And the galaxy better pay attention." The last Void Collective ship tried to escape, but the UES Victory was waiting for it. Captain Danny Walsh had been a cargo pilot before the war. He knew how to catch things that were trying to run away. "This is for everyone who died," he said, and fired his ship's ancient missiles. The enemy ship exploded in a flash of light. The battle was over. The Void Collective was defeated. And the galaxy had just learned that humans were still alive, still fighting, and still very dangerous. In the quiet after the battle, Admiral Hart looked at her damaged fleet. Half her ships were hurt. Hundreds of her people were dead. But they had won. They had reminded the galaxy what humans could do when they were pushed too far. The fleet was old, rusty, and human, and that had been enough. The news spread through the galaxy faster than light itself. In the great halls of the Galactic Council, emergency meetings were called for the first time in 50 years. Ambassador Vel Corian of the Centauri Federation pulled up old files that hadn't been opened in 3 centuries. "Humans," he said, his voice shaking. "The files say they were wiped out completely. Every world burned, every ship destroyed. How can they still be alive?" President Zach Molar of the trade union looked at the battle reports from Kepler system. "According to this, 12 primitive ships destroyed an entire Void Collective fleet. That's impossible. The Void Collective has never been defeated." "Maybe the reports are wrong," suggested Admiral Rex Kovar of the Military Council. "Maybe the Zephyrians are lying to make themselves look better." But more reports kept coming in, from the hegemony of Cass, from the Crystal Empire, from dozens of smaller powers, all saying the same thing. Humans were back and they were dangerous. Captain Danny Walsh stood on the bridge of his new ship, the UES Retribution. It used to be a Void Collective cruiser until the humans captured it during the battle. Now it was painted with human colors, and armed with human weapons. It looked strange, like 2 different technologies forced together. "Captain," said his new communications officer, "we're getting another request for military help. This time it's from the hegemony of Cass." Danny almost laughed. The hegemony of Cass had been one of the races that attacked Earth 300 years ago. They had burned human colonies and killed billions of people. Now they wanted human help. "What do they want?" he asked. "They say their border systems are under attack by something called the Deep Hunters. They're asking if we can send ships to help them." Danny looked at the message on his screen. It was written in very polite language, full of words like honored, allies, and mutual cooperation. But he could read between the lines. The hegemony was scared. On the UES Defiance, Admiral Lisa Hart was reading similar messages from all across the galaxy. The Centauri Federation wanted human military advisors. The trade union was offering to buy human weapons. Even the Crystal Empire, which never talked to other races, was asking for help. "It's funny," she said to her staff. 300 years ago, they said we were too dangerous to live. Now they can't wait to be our friends. Commander Susan Carter, from the UES Valor, had been put in charge of diplomatic relations. She had never been a diplomat before. She used to run the ship's recycling plant, but Admiral Hart said that someone who could turn garbage into useful things might be good at dealing with alien politics. "Ma'am," Susan said, "I've been looking at these requests for help. There's a pattern. Every race that's asking for help is being attacked by something new. Different enemies, but all of them are more dangerous than anything they've faced before." Hart looked at the star map. Red dots marked systems under attack. There were dozens of them, scattered across the galaxy. "It's like something woke up when we started fighting again." Dr. Ben Rodriguez was working in his laboratory on the UES Phoenix, a ship that had been rebuilt from the wreckage of 3 different vessels. He was studying captured Void Collective technology when he found something that made his blood turn cold. The Void Collective hadn't been attacking random systems. They had been preparing for something. Their ships were full of mapping data, star charts, and tactical information about every major race in the galaxy. They were scouts, gathering information for someone else. "Admiral Hart," he called over the radio. "I need to speak with you right away. I found something bad. Very bad." Within an hour, Hart was in his lab looking at his discovery. The Void Collective ships had been sending all their data to coordinates deep in empty space, far beyond the galaxy's edge. The signals were going to something big, something that was moving toward the galaxy's center. "How big?" Hart asked. Rodriguez showed her the energy readings. "Based on the signal strength, I'd say each ship is the size of a small planet, and there are hundreds of them." Hart felt cold. The Void Collective had been just the beginning. Something much worse was coming, and the galaxy wasn't ready for it. Lieutenant Commander Tracy Lewis was monitoring communications from her station on the UES horizon. She had been listening to the chatter between different alien governments. What she heard worried her. The major powers were panicking. Their advanced fleets, designed to fight conventional wars, were being destroyed by enemies that didn't follow any known tactics. The hegemony of Kaz had lost 30 ships to something called shadow swarms. The Centauri Federation was evacuating entire star systems from creatures that ate metal and grew stronger with each ship they consumed. "They're scared," Tracy reported to Admiral Hart. "All of them. They've been the big powers for so long, they forgot how to fight when things get desperate." Hart nodded. She had seen this before, back when the human colonies were first attacked. The powerful races of the galaxy were good at fighting wars where the rules were clear and the tactics were predictable. But when the rules changed, when the enemy did things that made no sense, they fell apart. "What about us?" Hart asked. "How are our people handling the new situation?" Tracy smiled. "They're excited, ma'am. For the first time in 300 years, we're not running away. We're fighting back. And we're winning." The human fleet had grown since the battle at Kepler. Volunteers from freed systems had joined them. The UES Redemption was crewed mostly by former Zephyrian prisoners. The UES Alliance had a mixed crew of humans and aliens working together. Engineer Kate Miller was in charge of integrating alien technology with human ships. It was like trying to make a fusion reactor work with a steam engine, but somehow she was making it happen. The hybrid ships that resulted were strange and ugly, but they worked. "The aliens keep asking how we do it," Kate told her team. "How do we make their advanced technology work with our old junk?" I told them it's simple. We don't care if it looks pretty. We only care if it works. The galaxy was learning that lesson the hard way. Pretty ships with perfect technology were being destroyed by enemies that fought dirty. But ugly ships held. Together with spare parts and stubbornness, kept flying, kept fighting, kept winning. Dr. Helen Brooks was studying the new enemies that were attacking the galaxy. Each one was different, but they all had one thing in common. They were adapting to whatever they fought. The shadow swarms learned from each battle. The Metal Eaters grew stronger with each ship they consumed. The Deep Hunters became smarter with each system they conquered. "It's like they're testing us," she told Admiral Hart. Each enemy is designed to counter a specific type of defense: energy shields, particle weapons, quantum computers, but they all have trouble with chaos, with unpredictability, with things that don't make sense. Hart understood. The galaxy was under attack by something that studied its enemies and created the perfect counter for each one. But humans were the one thing that couldn't be perfectly countered, because humans never fought the same way twice. Send a message to all the alien governments, Hart ordered. Tell them we'll help them. But they have to do things our way, no more perfect formations, no more predictable tactics. If they want to survive, they have to learn to fight like humans. The galaxy that had once tried to destroy humanity was about to learn the most important lesson of all. Sometimes the best way to win was to stop trying to look good and start trying to survive. And nobody was better at surviving than humans. The Devourer fleet came out of dark space like death itself. Ships the size of moons moved toward the galaxy's heart, their hulls black as the void between stars. They didn't send messages or make demands. They just began eating everything in their path. Whole star systems vanished in days. Planets were cracked open like eggs and their contents consumed. The energy readings were impossible. These ships seemed to bend space and time around them, making reality itself their weapon. Admiral Lisa Hart stood in the command center of the UES Defiance, watching the reports come in. The greatest military minds in the galaxy had run computer simulations. Every calculation said the same thing. Resistance was hopeless. The Devourer fleet could not be stopped. "Ma'am," said Captain Jake Morrison over the radio, "we're getting surrender offers from half the galaxy. The Centauri Federation wants to negotiate. The trade union is offering tribute. Even the military council is talking about laying down arms." Hart looked at the tactical display. The Devourer fleet was 3 days away from the core systems. In 72 hours, billions would die and the galaxy would end. "Send a message to every fleet, every government, every ship that can still fight," she ordered. "Tell them to meet us at Sol System. Tell them we're making our stand at Earth." Earth. The dead world that had been humanity's home. For 300 years it had been a burned rock circling a yellow star, a monument to galactic genocide. Now it would be the place where the galaxy made its final choice. Captain Nick Torres commanded the rebuilt UES Vanguard, a ship that looked like it had been assembled from spare parts in a junkyard, which it had. His crew was a mix of humans and aliens who had learned to work together during the long retreat to Sol. "Captain," said his tactical officer, a young Zephyrian named Kex Voller, "the alien fleets are arriving, but they're not coming in their best ships. They're bringing their oldest vessels, just like the humans suggested." Nick smiled. The galaxy was finally learning. You didn't fight impossible odds with your best equipment. You fought them with whatever you had, and you made it work through pure, stubborn will. The combined fleet that gathered around Earth was the strangest armada in galactic history. Ancient human generation ships flew alongside Zephyrian cargo haulers and Centauri mining barges. Hegemony warships that hadn't seen service in decades joined trade union freighters and Crystal Empire research vessels. Commander Rachel Stone coordinated the mixed formations from her command ship, the UES Unity. She had been a traffic controller before the war, managing the flow of ships through busy space lanes. Now she was organizing the largest gathering of different species in galactic history. "Remember," she broadcast to all ships, "we're not here to fight fair. We're not here to look good. We're here to survive. Follow human doctrine. If it's stupid, but it works, it's not stupid." Dr. Helen Brooks had spent the last 3 days studying the Devourer ships. What she found terrified her. These weren't just weapons. They were reality engines, machines that could rewrite the laws of physics in small areas. They made their own rules and forced the universe to obey. "But they need perfect conditions," she explained to the fleet commanders. "Their reality manipulation requires quantum coherence across huge distances. Any disruption, any chaos, any randomness breaks their control." "How much chaos do we need?" asked Admiral Hart. Helen looked at her calculations. "All of it. Every ship, every weapon, every piece of equipment we have. We need to create so much electromagnetic noise, so much random interference, that their systems can't cope." The plan was insane. Instead of coordinating attacks, the fleet would do everything at once. Every ship would fire every weapon, activate every system, and generate as much chaos as possible. It went against every rule of military strategy ever written. But humans had never been good at following rules. Captain Andy Miller stood on the bridge of the UES Earth Reborn, a ship built from salvaged parts from dozens of different races. His great-grandfather had escaped from Earth during the original genocide. Now Andy was bringing the human fleet home for the final battle. "All ships, this is Miller," he broadcast as the Devourer fleet entered the Sol system. "Welcome to Earth. Sorry about the mess, but we've been away for a while." The Devourer ships were even more terrifying up close. They didn't reflect light or cast shadows. They seemed to exist in spaces between reality, sliding through dimensions that shouldn't exist. When they fired their weapons, stars went out. "All ships commence Operation Pandemonium," Admiral Hart ordered. What happened next would have made any military academy instructor faint. The combined fleet attacked in complete chaos. Human railguns fired chunks of metal. Zephyrian energy. Weapons shot in random directions. Centauri ships dumped their cargo holds into space. Trade union vessels activated every commercial beacon they had. Hegemony warships fired ancient nuclear missiles that hadn't been used in centuries. Crystal Empire research ships activated every sensor and scanner simultaneously. Mining ships deployed cutting lasers and drilling beams. Cargo haulers launched containers full of garbage and spare parts. The electromagnetic interference was incredible. Radio waves, quantum static, gravitational anomalies, and pure random noise filled space around Earth. The Devourer ships began to slow, their perfect formations wavering as their reality engines struggled to maintain coherence. Captain Roy Mitchell, Jr., son of the hero who had died at Kepler, piloted his ship directly into the largest Devourer vessel. His ship was loaded with every piece of noisy, chaotic human technology they could find. Fusion reactors, plasma cutters, industrial welders, and mining explosives. The explosion when he hit wasn't just physical. It was a tear in reality itself, a wound in space-time that bled chaos and randomness. The Devourer ship convulsed and began to break apart as its reality controls failed. All across the battle, other ships were doing the same thing. Not because they were ordered to, but because they had learned from humans that sometimes sacrifice was the only way to protect what mattered. The final Devourer ship tried to escape, but the UES Defiance was waiting. Admiral Hart had saved her ship for this moment. 300 years of anger, 300 years of loss, 300 years of survival, all focused into one last attack. "This is for Earth," she said, and rammed her flagship into the heart of the enemy vessel. The explosion lit up the entire solar system. When the light faded, both ships were gone. But so was the last of the Devourer fleet. In the silence that followed, Captain Jake Morrison looked around at the mixed fleet. Ships from dozens of races floated in the space around Earth, their hulls scarred and smoking, their crews exhausted but alive. "Sole control to all ships," he broadcast. "Welcome to Earth. Population. Everyone who refused to give up." The galaxy had learned the most important lesson humanity could teach. It didn't matter how advanced your technology was. It didn't matter how perfect your tactics were. What mattered was refusing to quit when everything seemed hopeless. The fleet had been old, rusty, and human, but it had awakened something in the galaxy that no amount of advanced technology could replace: the will to survive, to fight, and to protect what mattered, no matter the cost. Earth was no longer a dead monument to genocide. It was the birthplace of a new galactic alliance, one built on the simple human principle that sometimes the most powerful weapon was just refusing to give up. The galaxy would never forget the humans again, and humanity would make sure of that.